I have 25. Yes, 25 seed starting tricks that you'll wish you had known about sooner. And a lot of these I really haven't even seen on the internet, and I'm kind of shocked by it because for me personally, it's helped me save hundreds of dollars and thousands of seeds. So let's get into it. These are going to be kind of rapid fire. If there are any concepts, Geek Crew, that you want to know more about or you want a video dedicated to, please comment down below and I will do that for you. I just don't know which concepts I guess that you guys are most interested in. And if you don't know what the Geek Crew is, we're a group of misfit wannabe garden scientists. And if you want to join our group, you just hit the subscribe button, completely free. And it's a wonderful group. You'll figure that out real fast in the comment section. We're nice. We don't judge. Okay, number one is seed position. Concept is that the embryo or the radicle needs to be facing upwards or downwards depending on the seed you have. So some seeds benefit from having an upwards positioning, some have a benefit of having a downward positioning. And the power behind that is called gravitropism. There is negative gravitropism, which is going upwards, and there is positive gravitropism, which is going downwards. But you'll have to check out that other video to learn more. Number two is actually chitting. So chitting, if you don't know what that is the process of getting your potatoes to sprout. If you've ever had those long, gangly things coming off your tomato, turns out you should remove those and actually expose your tomato to a little bit of moisture combined with light. And this will make much shorter sprouts. The results overall increase the yield, the plant vigor, reduce disease and pest pressure, as well as just overall improving the tuber quality. But hands down, the most important study I found, particularly to those of you in colder climates, was from 2012. It was published in the European Journal of Agronomy by Kuhlmann et al. And it looked at the effects of pre-sprouting chitting on early development and harvest of potatoes. So what they found out was that when you chit your potatoes, it can result in a harvest 2 to 3 weeks earlier. And 2 to 3 weeks is a long time. So if you are in a cold climate, you can see very quickly how this would benefit you. Number three is going to be misting over bottom watering or just regular watering. So misting you can use when the seedlings are smaller in size and don't have high demand for water needs. I personally use this with flowers, particularly smaller sized flowers, along with tomatoes and peppers. As easy as bottom watering can be, it also can cause some issues. And while you don't necessarily see those issues firsthand, it is something that contributes to a weaker plant down the line. And this just very simply is because wherever there is standing water, there is little to no oxygen if you're using a regular seed starting mix that doesn't have high porosity, or you bottom water and actually fill the entire tray. This lack of oxygen results in very poor root development and root hair development, and therefore one of the better ways to go about this is actually via misting. It will reduce the amount of mold you have, and again, develop a stronger root system. Which leads me into my next one. If you have issues with mold, you need to use vermiculite and stop using cinnamon. In 2012, a study done by Barrett et al. That was published in the Hort Science Journal focused on the effects of different seed starting mediums, including vermiculite, on seed germination and seedling growth. The research found that vermiculite, when used in combination with other mediums such as perlites, significantly improved seed germination rates compared to soil alone. This was due to vermiculite's ability to retain moisture while allowing excess water to drain away. It helped with an ideal balance between aeration and moisture content. Another really interesting one was from 2007 that was published in the Journal of Applied Horticulture by Singh and Kunar. The performance of vermiculite was compared with peat as a medium for seed starting in various plant species. Vermiculite was found to provide better results in seed starting compared to peat, particularly in terms of seed emergence and early growth. This is because vermiculite allowed for uniform moisture distribution and reduced the risk of water stress that can occur in peat-based mixes. It also helped avoid compaction that peat can sometimes cause, which can hinder the seedling root expansion. So I talked about this in my video about some tools or products that experts use. And in that video, I talked about how I actually use only vermiculite, straight vermiculite, for my smaller flower seeds. And the reason for it is because it results in a much stronger seedling, particularly when we're talking about very tiny flower seedlings. Peat is too dense and it does, I find, produce a poor root system compared to vermiculite when it comes to those smaller plants. Combo that with, it's much easier to get a balance between moisture and air, and it's just game over. The other reason I use it is to top dress on my potting soil, and this increases just airflow, and I do find it reduces the amount of mold. So number 5 is actually lighting, and more specifically, the duration of light. I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video because I actually just published a video not too long ago about lighting and what height / how long you should have it on for, and it actually all comes down to the type of plant you're growing along with the type of light you're using. Needless to say, some plants, and when you're using specific lights, need much more time under light when compared to a more intense light or a plant that doesn't require as much sun. The next one is kind of related, and that is the actual physical distance from the plant. I will say it is very rare when seed starting that the light should not be mere inches from your plant itself, unless of course you're using like a very high powered LED, and that can cause some burning. Those ones you want to avoid. But my tip to you is to drop your lights low. And I personally borderland have my lights sitting on top of my plants when it comes to seed starting. Number 7 is being able to identify lighting issues, but more specifically, being able to identify the subtle signs of lighting issues. We're all familiar with the turned up leaves, the leaning of a plant, the sunburn, etc. and so forth when it comes to lighting issues. But there are other signs. For example, a plant that is under high lighting stress may put on more trichomes in hopes of protecting it against some light. Think of Dusty Millers. That's why Dusty Miller has that many trichomes. It's trying to shade itself from intense light. The other thing is actually darker leaves. In some cases, your plant can get very dark leaves, and this may be a sign that your plants are happy and actually under a proper level of lighting, whereas very light leaves or yellow leaves can mean the opposite. Not enough heat. Number 7.5 is that you should join the geek crew. Number 8 is heat mats. So all plants have a specific temperature range in which they like to germinate in. And that more specifically is an ambient temperature. It is the soil temperature itself. So while you can plug a heat mat in and just throw your plants on top, but if you want to ensure that you don't get leggy plants from excessive levels of heat, getting a heat mat with a dial on it, along with a soil temperature thermometer to make sure that it's at the temperature it needs to be, can not only increase your rates of germination, decrease your rates of dampening off, but help you avoid those really stringy looking seedlings that can come from heat mats that run too warm. So heat mats, you've heard me mention before, should be on 24/7 until everything has germinated, and then that heat mat can be pulled away. Well, fans, I actually encourage you to mimic Mother Nature. Mother Nature tends to not be that strong when it comes to wind during the nighttime hours. So if you plug your fan into the exact same timer as your lights, you end up mimicking Mother Nature. And whenever you're mimicking Mother Nature for plants starting, it usually is in your benefit. Plants do not need the stress of being blown around indefinitely all the time. So number 12 is actually temperature differential. This one is for particularly nerdy gardeners. Research published in Canadian Journal of Plant Sciences investigated the effects of different day and nighttime temperatures on tomato growth and yield. The study concluded that maintaining a daytime temperature of 20.8 to 21 degrees Celsius and a nighttime temperature of 18.5 to 19 degrees Celsius resulted in the most optimal early season fruit yield and quality. So essentially, temperature differential is the difference in temperature between nighttime and daytime. Again, Mother Nature tends to do this as well. So if you're able to mimic it in your seed starting setup, it can play to your benefit. Negative differential is when your nighttime temps are higher than your daytime temps, and more specifically, it's usually within 5 to 10 degrees. This can cause inhibited stem elongation. Now, while this isn't beneficial to all plants, in some cases we actually use chemical inhibitors on a greenhouse scale to help keep plants nice and compact, particularly decorative ones. And one way to mimic this without chemical products is actually to change the temperature of your greenhouse or your growing setup based on what your desired results may be. Number 12 is winter sowing. So if you don't have grow lights, the preferential choice would be to do winter sowing over having to go purchase stuff from the store or waiting until the soil is warm enough to plant outdoors. There are a number of different plants you can actually start in a winter sowing setup. I've even seen tomatoes done in winter sowing setups, particularly early varieties like Early Girl and Manitoba. And it works well, even in cold climates like Saskatchewan. Number 13 is one that I utilize all the time in the spring, particularly because I'm too lazy to pull all the frost cloth out every single time there's a frost warning, and that is using water for frost protection. When you go this route, you're leveraging something called latent heat fusion. Essentially, water releases heat during the freezing process. So if you apply water to your plant's leaves, as the water begins to freeze, it can release small levels of heat, which will in turn help raise the temperature of the plant slightly and potentially prevent it from dipping low enough to cause cell damage. It also can have an insulating effect. If a layer of very thin ice is accumulated on the leaf, it can act as an insulating barrier, similar to how snow is insulating, and again, reduce the impact of cold air on the plant's tissues. The other one is just slowing the rate of cooling. Water has something called a high specific heat, meaning it can absorb a lot of heat before the temperature drops significantly. This means spraying water on a plant can help slow down the rate of the temperature decrease on the plant itself. Now I will say the timing for this is going to be the key. You don't want to put it on too early and then it all evaporate and have no benefit. And you don't want to put it on too late and end up with plants that were already hit with frost. So when I do it is usually at 9-10 o'clock at night, and that does limp me through the colder time of the night, which is usually midnight to about 3 o'clock in the spring. Number 15, I think we're on, is do not walk on wet soil. Seriously. If your garden is beginning to thaw out and you have snow, pooling water, heavy rains, or you're just simply watering it, do not step on the soil, whether it's your lawn, your garden, you name it. Wet soil compacts incredibly easily compared to dry soil. If it's frozen, you're okay. And if it's bone dry, you're okay. But the level of compaction you can cause just simply by walking on wet soil is quite high. And if you do this for prolonged periods of time, your only way out may be tillage, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not against it. It's just they're expensive to rent, okay? Number 16 is seed cell size matters. So there are a ton of different sizes you can go for when it comes to seed starting. There's your regular size seed cells, there are your nursery pots, there are micro mini seed cells, and every single one of these has a different benefit. The smaller the seed cell, the lower amount of water it can hold, and therefore the less likely for seed rot. The larger the cell, the less likely you are to have to transplant. And in some cases, plants can actually benefit from the transplanting process. So you may want to research what plants you're starting and whether or not they would benefit from being roughed up a bit when it comes to taking it out of the smaller seed cell. Number 17 is that seed starting mix is different than potting soil. So potting soil tends to have longer fibers of peat combined with chunkier pieces of perlite. And this, particularly in an HP formula, results in a very airy type of soil. And this can benefit seed starting in some ways, and in other ways it can be a detriment depending on the seed you're starting and just the conditions that that seed has been placed in. So I personally use seed starting soil in the smaller sized cells, and you could use regular potting soil in a nursery pot sized container. The lack of perlite and the smaller fiber length of the seed starting mix peat or coconut coir helps to ensure that there's good seed soil contact without having to compact it. And this results in proper moisture transfer and ultimately very good anchoring of your root, which in turn results in better upper biomass. So choose wisely when it comes to your seed starting mix. I would personally avoid any sort of potting soil, particularly an HP potting soil, in just a regular seed cell. But also avoid it for any sort of blockers. Number 18 is carrots and 2x4s. So this is a trick I've seen on the internet, and I tried it and it works. Carrots, if you did not know, are notorious for having poor levels of germination, partially because they don't like to be sown deep, and you combine that with the fact that the soil that it is there tends to dry out a little bit quicker, and it's just game over for a lot of your carrot seeds. One way to counter this is to put a board over top of your row in which you put your carrot seeds. It's very simple. You literally sow your carrots, put the board on top, check underneath the board every once in a while. Once everybody's germinated, pull that board off and then just treat it as you normally would. And it works fantastically. Number 19 is that lettuce seeds, yes, seeds, not the plant, the seeds need light. Turns out lettuce are a part of a group called phytochromes. And phytochromes have a light-dependent germination mechanism that requires light for the plant to germinate. More specifically, red light. So what this means is that lettuce seeds I ever cover and I simply sprinkle it on the soil surface, or when I start them indoors, I again just sprinkle it on the soil surface. This will help ensure higher levels of germination because that red light hits the seed, which causes the phytochromes to start doing their job, which in turn causes germination. Without this process, lettuce seeds will not germinate. They will just lay dormant or rot is the other option. Number 20 is too late to do now, but plant your peas in the fall. Yes. Planting your peas in the fall, whether you want peas or not in your life, is incredibly beneficial. And let me tell you why. I personally put peas sporadically throughout the entire garden. All my beds have it. All the beds in different spots have it, containers, etc., and so forth. The reason for this is because they are my indicator for when it's time to get into the garden. When they sprout and I see them growing happy and healthy, I know that approximately up to 3 inches in depth is a warmer temp that will allow for seed germination to take place, and I need to get my butt in gear to get the seeds in the ground as soon as possible without risking them rotting in the soil because it's still too cold. It's like literally the canary in the coal mine for your garden, but the opposite of death and more towards the life side of things. 21 is that onion seeds are way better than onion starts. I, for years, used onion starts over seeds because I thought there's no way in heck in a cold climate onion seeds would do better than an already basically formed bulb. Well, let me tell you, it is drastically better. You have to start them early, preferably now, or you would have started them about a month or two ago, but now is like your last call for this. And you literally just sprinkle them on top. You can get way more of them for cheaper, and the bulbs that you get from that are drastically better than the sets version of it. So onion seeds over sets, and it's easy. If we're talking one of the easiest seeds to start, onions are it. Which leads me into my next one, which is that chopping onions isn't a good thing. You want to avoid this, and I did a whole video on this. I will link it at the end of this. Essentially, what you're cutting off is the leaves, and the leaves are responsible for photosynthesis. And photosynthesis and onions the purpose for it is to increase storage, and the storage mechanism of an onion is the bulb. So you can see if you have less stuff producing storage, you end up with a smaller bulb. Onion leaf size is what we like to call positively correlated to bulb size. Next up is nematodes. So nematodes are invisible little bugs that I highly recommend you pop into your potting soil bags now over waiting till they're in the cells or just not applying at all. The reason for this is because nematodes will go in and they will eat all your fungus gnats. And if you're starting a lot of seeds indoors, you very quickly will be overrun with those very irritating fungus gnats. So to help prevent against this, make sure your bag of soil is semi-moist, pop the nematode balls in and let them go to work. Next up is seed soil connection. So what I mean by this is that you don't just simply want to throw your seeds in the ground and throw the soil back over top. You do want to give a semi-nice firm press to ensure that there is good seed soil contact, and this will increase your rates of germination and make for a happy, healthier plant when the root does come out, because it helps more with anchoring. So don't just throw your soil in, leave it all fluffy, and pop the seed in. What you want to do is put the soil in, water it, which can cause some compaction, which is what we want, and then pop your seed in. Next up is that smaller plants transplant better. So this one, interestingly enough, I tried to do some research on, and there wasn't much out there. There was a couple trials I saw, and most of which agree to the fact that smaller plants transplant better. And in particular, they pointed towards tomatoes having 4 leaves in and around the 4-leaf mark. Personally, don't start any tomatoes until April. And it's painful to do every single year, because every year I see everyone with their glorious tomatoes and I want them in March as well. But I hold my guns and I wait, because it is a lot less stressful when it comes to putting them back outdoors. The last one is buckets. I did a whole video on this and you're gonna wanna check it out right here. And simply said, I don't harden off. I just put a bucket around my plant and then I remove the bucket after about 3 weeks. It completely negates me having to pull plant trays out and in and out and in. It's just a one-stop shop. It protects it against the wind, against intense sun, and it gives it enough time to adapt to its new spot before you send it out on its way. My baby brother's getting into gardening, and he's asking me about plant lights because he wants to start weeding peppers. And let me just say, Morgy Porgy pudding and pie, you're adorable. If he watches my channel, I can guarantee you I'm going to get a very aggressive Snapchat after he watches this. Any hoosers,